How about a little breather from nonstop news at Ohio State? I'll knock on wood, but Tuesday was a relatively quiet one around Ohio State. So the Hump Day edition of the Podcast Daily is going to look a little bit different. That's Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham. I am Austin Ward. My question for you guys is, to this point, Bill, what has been the most impactful move you think for the Buckeyes?
Oh, man. That's tough. I would say to this point, probably keeping Tyleik Williams, maybe.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like Tyleik was one of the best defensive tackles in all of college football last year. And like I know his Cotton Bowl was maybe not great. He did look a little winded by the end of that game, but I'm not really holding that against him. Every game up until that point, I thought it was really excellent football we saw from Tyleik. So to get back a guy who I think has all-American ceiling is probably too strong, but like definitely first team all-conference ceiling and like the ceiling to be one of the best players in the country at his position, I think is tremendously impactful. So up until now, I think that's the biggest one.
Okay. 1 vote for Tyleik Williams, 1 vote from Bill stealing what I thought would be an easy one for me. Guess I'll have to come up with something else. Berm, what do you think?
I don't really ever think about things in the micro sense. So
you don't.
Ohio State has picked up 4 new offensive starters in the last week. And so I don't know how you can look at anything other than that. And even if Travion Henderson returns, which again is still a very real possibility, the idea of Quinshon Judkins and Will Howard and Will Kaczmarek and Seth McLaughlin, those guys are not coming into Ohio State to be depth pieces. Those are 4 guys that are hole fillers and impact makers. And I don't know how you can look at anything other than that. If you want to, slice it off.
I just told you how, Berm. I literally just told you how.
No.
Okay.
If you want to slice off one piece of that, it's Will Howard. You get a new quarterback. Like, I mean, that there's nothing that decision will make or break the 2024 Ohio State football team. So nothing else will make or break the team more than whether or not Will Howard lives up to what Ryan Day expects him to be. And nothing impacted 2023 more than Kyle McCord maybe being a step or 2 below what everyone expected him to be. And Will Howard will now assume all that pressure and all that responsibility for how next season goes.
So the originator of the drill down says that he can't think in the micro. He's only working in the macro.
It's 2024, man. I everything now is just big picture and good vibes, man. It's all about vibes.
Huh. Wow. Things have changed, man. I like the old Berm better. Bring the 2023 version back.
He'll be back soon enough. Don't worry.
Okay. That sounds right. I thought I would be able to just, zig while you guys zagged and take a defensive tackle returning for his senior year. But I guess I have to go back to the old me and say that bringing in a new starting quarterback is a pretty big deal. I'm really curious about it. The reason I don't it doesn't come to mind even as influential and impactful as you'd think it was going to be. To a guy with a conference championship, multi-year starting at the Power 5 level. Even watching several games of his, it's hard for me to project that forward. I'm not trying to be skeptical about Will Howard in any way. I think that the tools are there and really intriguing, and we've talked about him a ton, but I still haven't, seen him on a practice yet for Ohio State. Don't know how long it's going to take in the offense. It'll still be the first time for him doing that. To Berm's point, one way or the other, it's going to determine the course of the season. So I guess if we're saying which one is going to swing the year for Ohio State, that could go either way, and then the quarterback becomes really important. But the guys that they get back, and there's still the possibility for more as this week progresses, this is the day today, Wednesday, January 10th, that Denzel Burke said that he would be announcing. So we'll see what happens for Ohio State there. Maybe the answer could change by later on today. I don't know. But having somebody like Tyleik Williams, having Jack Sawyer back, even Ty Hamilton, who we talked about making his decision on Monday, these things are big deals. Keeping your own players in the program, that's really what you want to do. If you can be selective and targeted in the transfer portal, yes, do that. And we've seen Ohio State have success with Trey Sermon and Jonah Jackson and obviously Justin Fields. But the best thing you can do for the health of your program is have guys see it through to the finish line. And I think that is pretty significant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with Berm on the starting quarterback being most important, but it could not work out. So we'll see what it looks like. I feel like I know that Tyleek's going to be good, which is why I picked him. And like there's a body of work with all these guys that are coming back that I think would lead us to pick really any of them, and also Quinshon Judkins too. The other transfers there are question marks, and that's not me saying they're going to be bad, but I'm not going to also tell you that I feel 100% great about all those pickups working out either. There's work to be done, I think, with Will Howard and Seth McLaughlin and Will Kekmaric too. Like, it's a guy making the jump from the MAC to the Big Ten. That's a big jump. So I think there's reason to believe all three can be very good and impactful players for Ohio State. But I'm not all the way there just yet, where I am basically all the way there with everyone who's coming back on the roster and also the running back they just picked up.
I'm going to say this. Will Kekmaric won a MAC championship at Ohio. Will Howard won a Big 12 championship at Kansas State. Seth McLaughlin won an SEC championship at Alabama. How many of the current players at Ohio State and the guys who are returning for their next year have won a Big 10 championship?
Did those guys win those by themselves?
Yes.
Oh,
I think that's indisputable.
That makes it even more impressive.
Yeah,
it is. I'm just saying you're adding not just players at positions you need, but you're adding guys that have won games. You're adding a guy like Seth McLaughlin who has played in a spot similar to Ohio State, one of the 3 or 4 places in the country where you are expected to win every single game. I think that sort of pressure that these guys have already played with in their careers, that sort of recipe, the success they've had, is why, like, I look at them taking that step into Ohio State and it being seamless and saying, hey, this will be a different situation, of course, but I don't see any. I mean, I've already called him Willie Heisman. Okay. Will Howard is going to New York as a Heisman finalist in December. So bold prediction number 1 for the 2024 season is that I have.
That's a micro.
Yeah. I don't know, man. Like, I know that when we first started talking about the Will Howard thing, we talked about it the day after we got back from Dallas and we were all exhausted and run down. And it wasn't like an energetic conversation.
Some of us still are.
I've watched a lot about this kid in the last couple of days, and I just think it's a winner. I think it's going to be an absolute home run for Ohio State, and so like I can't think anything other than that as far as what's going to be the biggest impact maker in 2024. Because I think Hero Canoe and Jason McDonald or Jason Moore and Caden McDonald and Taiwan Malone, I think all those guys could have had an opportunity to elevate their game. Maybe not to what Tyleek did last year, but as a collective, I think that they could have been, a good replacement. I don't know that I feel that way about the quarterback situation. I think that you would have gone into 2024 feeling a lot of question marks about the position if you didn't bring in Will Howard, and I think that he answers a lot of them.
What things were you watching?
Just film of Will Howard, watching him play football. The kid's a competitor. The kid he's so much bigger than I think people expect him to be. Number one, he's far more athletic than like the early comparisons. Like, oh, what's the difference between him and Kyle McCord? Like, it's not really close how much more athletic Will Howard is than Kyle McCord. I just, he is a little bit of a gunslinger. I think you can coach a lot of that stuff to be more careful with the football. And I just think about a kid like that. I said it the other day, but if you put him in a room with Carnell Tate and Jeremiah Smith and Brandon Ennis and Emeka Ibuka and Travion Henderson and Quinshon Judkins, like, this is not a kid you can't look at his output the last couple of years and expect it to be anywhere near what he should have at Ohio State. And he's been pretty good.
Doug and I did the Kings of Columbus on Tuesday. It went up Tuesday evening. And like a large chunk of it is about Will Howard. And like the summary of that is like, he's a little raw in some places, but there's a ton to work with there. So like, I get what you're saying. If you watch multiple games of his account, if you pick the wrong game to watch, you might think like, cool, I don't know about this guy. But if you watch multiple games of his at Kansas State, I think you see, a body of work there that is enticing and a skill set that is enticing. And I think the offense will need to be tweaked a little bit to bring out the best in him. But there's no reason to, I guess, like, doubt wholeheartedly that Ohio State's not going to be able to get anything more out of him than what he was at Kansas State. I think there's a lot of room there for him to improve, and I think there's a lot of reason to believe that Ohio State can get him to that level. I guess I don't want to guarantee it as much as Berm did by saying that Will Howard's going to be a Heisman Trophy candidate or finalist. Is he going to win? Is he going to win?
No, everyone is a Heisman Trophy candidate.
Am I?
That's the secret.
He will be a Heisman Trophy finalist.
Got it.
I voted for Bill last year.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I can't believe that you didn't get an invite.
I voted for Clay Aiken.
Ooh, that's a good one. He is always an option. Kudos to both of you. You made it through a segment about Will Howard, and neither of you said the name Josh Allen. So I'm much happier about that than what we've been going through.
I hope he doesn't turn the ball over as much as Josh Allen does.
Watch your mouth. Watch your mouth. All right. He won't this weekend. He's going to win. There are pending decisions, and a lot of them for Ohio State as the rest of this week goes on, and potentially the month. I don't know. We'll see how long some of this stuff plays out. What is going to be the most impactful decision that happens by Monday, the NFL draft deadline day?
Denzel Burke.
What
you just said? I don't know. Jordan Hancock. Like I have a football crush on Jordan Hancock. So for me, maybe that's my answer. He like kind of ties the whole defense together for me, and like that to have a guy like that at that position, I just think is so valuable. So I guess I'll change my answer. I'll say Jordan Hancock, what he decides to do, and I think Ohio State might have to get creative in finding some answers for that nickel spot if Jordan Hancock does decide to go to the NFL. And it's not, I don't mean this to demean Denzel Burke as a player at all, but there's at least a clear succession plan at that position. If Denzel does decide to go to the NFL, it's less clear for me with Jordan Hancock. So I think I would say that's the biggest one still kind of lingering out there.
Yeah. And the point you just brought up is correct. I mean, when you look at what Jordan Hancock, Denzel Burke may have been the best defensive back on the team in 2023, but Jordan Hancock is the most irreplaceable of that group right now, and that's the difference. But to me, the answer is TreVeyon Henderson, because I think that he is a legitimate Heisman Trophy, contender, finalist, if he's healthy and plays the way he played.
Multiple finalists on this roster. Wow.
I mean, were you alive in 2019? The Buckeyes had 3 of the top 6, vote getters in 2019. It's possible. And TreVeyon Henderson, we saw that next gear, that next level out of him in the last 5 weeks of the year, that if you take that and extrapolate it through a full season where he's got a hammer like Judkins who's rotating in and out of the lineup with him, I think that is a really, really deadly combination. And if you don't get TreVeyon Henderson back, you're going to need to go to the transfer portal and find someone else, and that significantly lowers the overall talent in the room. I just think that the 1-2 punch of Henderson and Judkins is going to be a really, really special combination. And then you have the change of pace with Dallan Hayden, who I think can be an elite player at Ohio State. That room goes from being a pretty big question mark a month ago, where you were not sure if Trey was going to come back, and Mayan leaves, and Evan leaves, and Chip leaves, and you're like, oh, what the hell is going to be in the running back room? And now all of a sudden you're looking at Judkins, Henderson, Hayden with I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by what they get out of James Peoples and Sam Williams-Dixon. So now you got a really good room. If you lose Trey, that changes a lot in the offense.
I feel like there's a nice safety net now with Quinshon Judkins there in the backfield that doesn't diminish TreVeyon Henderson.
Sure, but he doesn't want to have 350 carries. So you still need to go find someone else.
No, I for sure. And it wasn't like, there's no way, like TreVeyon's the wrong answer. Like I think it's a good answer, a correct answer. But I think that adding Judkins, having Dallan Hayden, and some of the other pieces that are in place here for Ohio State mean that like it doesn't have to be all or nothing with TreVeyon Henderson. And we've seen, other options materialize, like a Trey Sermon in the transfer portal, that like you can find some veteran running backs who may be able to still help if Judkins and Hayden would need a third, which, to your point, and if you're going to play 1 million games in the expanded playoff next year, you're going to need more than 3. We've seen Ohio State already have to go through 5, basically the last 2 or 3 years in a row. So you're certainly not wrong about that. But I feel more confident that the running back depth is going to be okay than I do if JT Tuimoloau leaves, and at defensive end, you're forcing Caden Curry and Kenyatta Jackson into the lineup, where it's not that I don't think that those two guys are good players, not that I don't think that they can make a big jump after 2 seasons in the program going into year 3. And we've seen a ton of dudes make that leap, the Larry leap in year 3. Like I'm expecting that probably will happen, but it's a little bit of a bet still on inexperience. They were not able to play a ton in year 2, which whether that was in reaction to over rotation or that Larry didn't really believe that Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry were ready for that, he didn't have them involved nearly as much as JT and Jack a year ago. There are parts of that I think are positive for those two guys, and there are parts that I think are a little bit concerning for the next wave coming up. There's plenty of time where Ohio State could address that if they lose JT, and it feels to me at this very moment like they will. Either whether he comes back or goes, I think that is going to be a significant swing for Ohio State, and his decision is the one that I would say I have the least clarity on right now, and it will definitely have a large and long-term impact on Ohio State.
Yeah, if that happens, you have 6 defensive ends, right? And like Jack's kind of the only one who's played a significant workload. Like Kenyatta and Caden Curry have been in some big spots, but like Mitchell Melton hasn't really played. He's an older guy, but he hasn't played. And you have Edric Houston as a true freshman and Josh Mickens as a redshirt freshman. So like, yeah, that becomes dicey, I think, pretty quickly. Even if you are a believer in Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry, and I certainly am, that does feel like a spot where you need to address it with a transfer or like get creative with some guys on your roster, whether that's like a CJ Hicks or a Sonny Styles to try to supplement the pass rush that way.
Or Arvell Reese.
Did you guys see all the people who are putting out their early predictions for the playoffs for 2024 and not including Ohio State? What do you think of that?
In a 12-team playoff, not
who
including
did
Ohio
that?
State?
I've seen a couple national people who have not included Ohio State.
Was it Dennis Dodd? It was Dennis
Give
Dodd.
me names.
The one I saw today was Barrett Sally from CBS, and I'm just curious as
Do you
to
have 12 SEC teams?
I didn't. All I noticed was that Ohio State wasn't in it, so I'm just trying to figure out what planet people are living on if they think Ohio State's not going to be one of the top 12 teams in the country next year.
Have they taken a look not just at Ohio State's roster, which is certainly one of the 12 best, probably one of the 4 best, but also their schedule? Tell me how that team does not make the playoff. What world that is.
I'm saying, like, because to not finish in the top 12, you figure Ohio State will have to lose 3 games in the regular season, right?
Yeah.
Like
3.
I mean, because you could conceivably lose to a top 8 team in Oregon and a top 8 team in Michigan and still make the playoff, I think, if depending on the way everything else shakes out. So I don't know what they're thinking.
I'm looking at his bracket now because I had to get a glimpse at these Warlocks after you told me that.
Give it to us. Feed it to us.
He is. I'll just give you the whole thing. Georgia 1, Michigan 2, Clemson 3, Oklahoma State 4, Texas 5, Alabama 6, Washington 7, Notre Dame 8, Utah 9, Ole Miss 10, Tulane 11, Boise State 12. So he's got 2 G5 teams in, 2 Big 12 teams in, which is like more of a G5 league now than it is a P5 league anymore. And Washington, which like loses every impactful player off its roster in.
Guess who else is losing all their impactful players? The reigning national champions, they're also going to lose their coach. He has them too?
Yeah, he sure does.
I mean,
I guess we're all just slaves to the moment, right? Like everyone's just in panic mode because I saw that, and I'd seen a few others in the last couple of days that had listed the same general idea. And I guess are we dumb for not putting that much stock into the Cotton Bowl, or is everyone else just that much brighter?
I mean, I would say I'm thinking back 12 days. Were there people who put more stock into evaluating the Cotton Bowl than we did when we were standing at AT&T Stadium? Like, we probably put way more into it in the moment than we should have. But but I said going into it, and I quickly, after like just evaluating what happened on the field, I wasn't trying to make sweeping assessments of what that meant for the previous 12 games, or that it changed a bunch of opinions about the way I felt about the staff alignment or any of the other things. Like, once it was over, it was over. It didn't change that Ohio State was getting really good news about its roster coming back. It didn't change that they upgraded in certain situations in the transfer portal. It doesn't change the fact that Ryan Day is currently making some pretty aggressive, maybe more changes than I would have anticipated 2 weeks ago. Like, I guess if that's what they're using to say Ohio State's not in the top 12 next year, then they are putting more stock in it. But that's madness to me. Like,
I mean, did anyone
I had to watch that game and cover it, and I'm done with it. Like, if anybody should have their brains infected by what they watched, it's the three of us who had to be there in person and torture ourselves to watch it.
Bill, you're a little more like objective than I get a little prone to flights of, emotional fancy. But when you watched the Michigan with Washington game on Monday night, do you watch that and not realize that Ohio State was clearly one of the 4 best teams in the country when they were at their full roster this year? Like, I don't know how anyone could watch that and think that wasn't the case.
Yeah, no, I thought Ohio State compared favorably to all 4 teams that made the playoff, like watching both the semifinals and the national championship. So yeah, I think that's a fair point. And I don't know, like that's just project. So it's at Oregon, at Penn State, home against Michigan. You're just projecting them to lose all 3 of their good games, right? And then you're saying they're not going to make the playoff. I guess that's not totally out of bounds. I don't know. Like those are difficult games, but
yeah, anyone can lose games. I mean, I guess that's the question. Like, it would have seemed to me then that the national media types are just like out on Ryan Day, and because I don't know that I don't think you can look at the roster and what's coming back and make that sort of leap without just assuming that Ryan Day cannot win an important football game ever again.
Yeah, I do feel like I have seen an increase in that sentiment after this year. Like, I think after last year, there were a lot of people like nationally who still believed Ryan Day could win a championship here. And then after this season, I think they've soured on him a little bit, which I don't necessarily think is wrong based on the results. But leaving Ohio State out of the first 12-team playoff is probably a step too far for me.
We also don't really know how the committee is going to handle a 12-team playoff. And even if they lost the 3 games and 2 of them were on the road to assuming top 10 teams, right? And Barrett Sally's number 2 for the preseason, like, would that still be the resume that's good enough? Like, you're going to take Boise State over a 9-3 Ohio State? I mean, I really don't know. We've never been in this situation, and it's going to be just like going back to 2014, where there were a lot of sweeping assessments. Like, this means you're definitively out, and that wasn't the case for Ohio State when they came back through and won the Big Ten and leapfrogged a couple spots in the last year. Now we had a decade to look at it, and we still were surprised by what happened with the College Football Playoff Selection Committee a month ago when Alabama got in. So that part, I think, even if you're looking at Ohio State's schedule and saying 9-3, which I think that's not where I'm at with this roster and this team, you still don't know that that's not good enough. If you're going to take Tulane and Boise State, that to me, that's kind of defeating the purpose of what they tried to accomplish here, to put into effectively 2 group of 5 teams compared to a Power 5 schedule with tough losses on the road. Like,
how do you even get to that point with Boise State? I mean, they just fired their coach. Like, they had, I don't even understand.
They won the Mountain West and retained the guy that won the Mountain West, and they kept their best player too. They have a lot coming back.
Cool.
I also picked them to be the G5 playoff team next year.
The second one, or
you didn't pick the only one.
You didn't pick also Tulane.
Yeah,
which
I did not do that. No.
Fun. I mean, it's a lot. I just saw it and I wanted to just get a little taste of what you guys were thinking about that, because it was interesting.
Yeah,
that's where
you accomplished your goal of getting us upset about hypothetical playoff scenarios on January 10th. So
Who knows? Maybe we'll be back later on Wednesday with like a staff judgments or something if something good happens for Ohio State.
We could also be back if something bad happens, but I don't want to put negative vibes out in the world for Berm, new and improved 2024 Berm, who joins us, as always, on the podcast daily, a hump day version, which was sort of a modified stock watch. I don't really know what it was. We got to get through it. We need Ohio State to get back to making news, and maybe they will later on today. For Bill Landis and Jeremy Birmingham, I'm Austin Ward. Thanks for joining us on the podcast daily. We'll talk to you later.